Welcome to the middle, the news from both sides, no spin. 3 stories today. Here's what happened, here's what the left says, what the right says, and here's what the facts actually show. Let's get into it. Iran, ceasefire on paper, war at sea. The United States and Iran agreed to an extended ceasefire on Tuesday night. By Wednesday morning, Iran had seized 2 container ships in the Strait of Hormuz. That's where we are. President Trump extended the 2-week truce indefinitely at the request of Pakistan, which is mediating talks, and said he was giving Tehran time to present a unified proposal. Hours later, Iran's Revolutionary Guard fired on and seized vessels in the strait. A third was hit. Iran says the U.S. naval blockade, which has continued throughout the ceasefire and is costing Tehran an estimated $500 million a day, makes the truce meaningless. The U.S. says the blockade is leverage, not a violation. Both sides are claiming the other broke the ceasefire first. The left's take? The left says Trump is trying to have it both ways. You cannot call something a ceasefire when simultaneously blockading a country's ports and seizing its ships. Iran's foreign minister called the blockade an act of war. And legally, there's a real argument he's right. The concern from the left isn't that Trump is being too tough. It's that incoherent pressure makes a deal less likely, not more, and that the next escalation could be one neither side planned for. The right's take? The right says the blockade is working exactly as intended. Iran is losing $500 million a day. Its military and police reportedly aren't getting paid. Trump isn't threatening from a position of weakness. He's threatening from a position of leverage. When Iran fires on container ships while asking for peace talks, the right says that's not evidence that pressure doesn't work. It's evidence that Iran is desperate and lashing out. The facts? Before the war, roughly 20% of the world's crude oil passed through the Strait of Hormuz. Energy analysts at Rystad Energy estimate it'll take until July for oil flows to reach 90% of pre-war levels, and then another 2 months for that oil to reach refineries. That's a potential 9-month supply shock still baked in, regardless of what happens next. Military planners from more than 30 countries are meeting at a Royal Air Force base outside London to design a multinational escort mission for commercial shipping in the Strait. Here's the thing that neither side is talking about. Iran's parliament speaker said this week that reopening the Strait of Hormuz is impossible as long as the U.S. blockade continues. Not difficult, impossible. That means even if a formal ceasefire agreement is signed tomorrow, the two sides still have to separately negotiate the blockade, which means the oil disruption could continue well past any peace deal. Bottom line, the ceasefire and the blockade are not the same negotiation, and right now, no one has a clear path to ending both. Story 2, the SPLC Indictment. The organization that spent 50 years tracking hate groups in America was just indicted for secretly paying them. On Tuesday, the Justice Department indicted the Southern Poverty Law Center, the SPLC, on 11 federal counts including wire fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. The allegation: from 2014 to 2023, the SPLC secretly paid more than $3 million to informants embedded inside extremist groups, the KKK, the National Alliance, the Aryan Nations, and hid those payments from donors using shell companies with names like Fox Photography and Rare Books Warehouse. The SPLC says the program saved lives and that the prosecution is political targeting. The DOJ says it's fraud. Full stop. The left's take? The left says this is the Trump DOJ doing what it does, using law enforcement as a weapon against its enemies. The SPLC has been a target of the right for years, and the indictment is notably thin on the most explosive claim. Acting AG Todd Blanche says the SPLC was manufacturing the extremism it purports to oppose, but the actual indictment doesn't charge anyone with using the funds to commit crimes. What's on trial here is whether a civil rights organization has to disclose every tactical decision to its donors, not whether it was secretly running a hate group. The left says prosecuting informant programs is a gift to the extremists the SPLC was fighting. The right's take? The right says the numbers tell the story. The SPLC raised hundreds of millions of dollars from donors who believed They were funding the fight against white supremacy. What they were actually funding was the payroll of white supremacists, including one person paid over $1 million while affiliated with a neo-Nazi group, and another who helped coordinate transportation to the 2017 Charlottesville rally. The right says the SPLC didn't just smear mainstream conservative organizations as hate groups. It was literally on the payroll of actual hate groups at the same time. The facts? Here's what the indictment actually says and doesn't say. It charges the SPLC with fraud for concealing payments from donors, not for funding hate group activity. The DOJ's own charging documents acknowledge the informants were providing intelligence on extremist groups. The question is about disclosure, not the practice itself. The FBA has paid informant programs inside extremist organizations for decades. It's a standard law enforcement tool. This case was reportedly opened during the Obama years, closed under Biden, and reopened under Trump. Here's the thing that neither side is telling you. The SPLC's informant program wasn't unusual. What's unusual is who's being charged for it. The U.S. government, through the FBI, has paid informants inside hate groups for decades without criminal liability. The legal hinge in this case is donor disclosure. But nobody is pointing out that the same FBI that announced these charges used to rely on the SPLC research to track those same groups, until Director Patel cut ties last October. The bottom line, the charges may be legally valid, but the selective timing of who gets prosecuted for running informants is a question neither side wants to answer. In story 3, RFK Jr. in Congress, 7 hearings in 7 days. The head of American Public Health just sat through 7 congressional hearings in 7 days, and his toughest questionnaire wasn't a Democrat. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wrapped up a marathon stretch on Capitol Hill Wednesday, his first appearances before Congress since September. Over 7 hearings, he defended the MAHA, Make America Healthy Again agenda, a proposed $16 billion cut to the HHS budget, changes to the childhood vaccine schedule, and the firing of the CDC director. 7 months ago, MAHA felt like a political juggernaut. This week, it looked a bit more fragile. The left's take? Democrats say Kennedy's tenure has been a slow-motion public health emergency. He overhauled the childhood vaccine schedule without outside scientific input, and measles cases are up. The CBO projects that Medicaid changes passed last year will cut $1.2 trillion in spending through 2035 and remove 13.1 million people from coverage. When asked whether he'd commit to implementing whatever the new CDC director recommends on vaccines, Kennedy said directly, "I'm not going to make that kind of commitment." Democrats say that sentence is the whole problem. The right's take? Republicans say Kennedy has delivered where others haven't. He negotiated drug prices. He issued new dietary guidelines. He's pushing to remove petroleum-based food dyes. He launched a rural health transformation fund. On Medicaid, the right's argument is that the projected spending reduction is about enforcement, removing ineligible enrollees and adding work requirements for non-disabled adults. Kennedy's framing? The program isn't getting smaller. It's getting more honest about who's in it. The facts? The CBO's projection of $1.2 trillion in reduced Medicaid spending is real, but the program was already projected to cost over $1 trillion by 2035. The $1.2 trillion represents money that won't be spent relative to the previous baseline, not $1.2 trillion taken from the current enrollees all at once. Work requirements apply only to non-disabled, childless adults. That said, the CBO does project 13.1 million fewer people enrolled by 2035. Here's the thing that neither side is talking about. Kennedy's sharpest critic this week wasn't Chuck Schumer or Bernie Sanders. It was Bill Cassidy, a Republican physician from Louisiana who chairs the Senate Health Committee and who cast the deciding vote to confirm Kennedy last year. Cassidy said Kennedy had broken specific promises on vaccines made during his confirmation. Meanwhile, Kennedy's pick for Surgeon General, wellness entrepreneur Casey Means, doesn't have the Republican votes to be confirmed. The MAHA coalition is fracturing from the inside. Bottom line, Kennedy may be winning the argument on chronic disease and food policy, but he's losing the argument on vaccines. and both are happening inside his own party. That's the middle for today. 3 stories, both sides, no agenda. If this is useful to you, share it with someone who's tired of being told what to think. See you next time.